A dog lies quietly in front of the hospital for 3 weeks, rain or shine, refusing to leave even a step. But who is it waiting for? No leash, no owner looking for it, and no one knows why it appeared here. But when a doctor decides to investigate, he discovers a truth that makes his heart ache. An unsent letter, a promise that cannot be fulfilled, and a love that continues to exist even when death has separated two destinies. Before we continue, comment and tell us where in the world you are watching this video from. And if you believe in touching stories, don't forget to subscribe now, because tomorrow there will be a special story for you. The sun was blazing down on the streets of Arizona. The July heat came not just from the blazing sky, but from the scorching earth itself, reflecting it like a giant mirror of fire. The air was so dry that everything seemed to stop breathing. Even the trees on the side of the road bowed in the scorching heat. St. Mary's Hospital, one of the city's busiest, was humming nonstop. Inside, Dr. Liam Bennett had just finished an 8-hour surgery. His neck ached, his shoulders were tense, and his eyelids were heavy. He wanted nothing more than a comfortable bed and a dreamless sleep. But then, he saw it. Right in front of the hospital, a golden retriever lay motionless on the sidewalk. Its golden fur was matted with dust and sweat, its tongue lolling out, its breathing rapid. It didn't bark, it didn't whine, it didn't cry for help. It just stood there, staring at the hospital door, as if the world outside no longer mattered. Who was it waiting for? Liam slowed his pace, frowning at the little creature. There was something in its eyes, a deep sadness, a hopeless waiting, something he couldn't ignore. "How long has it been here?" he asked, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Sophia Martinez, a veteran nurse, was standing nearby. She looked at him, then at the dog, her eyes shining with a hint of pity. 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Liam spun around, looking at Sophia as if she'd said something absurd. 3 weeks? You mean it hasn't left in 3 weeks? Sophia nodded slightly. That's right. Every day, from morning till night, it just lies there, looking at the hospital door. When it gets too hot, it retreats into the shade a little. When it rains, it just curls up and doesn't leave. Someone tried to take it back, but no matter who adopted it, it always comes back here. Liam looked down at the dog again. 3 weeks. That's a long time to wait in this heat, in the dust and the hurried footsteps. Why is it waiting? Who is it waiting for? And will that person ever come back? But one thing he's sure of, this dog isn't lost. It's not looking for a new place to live. It's waiting for one thing. A child walks by and stops to look at the dog. The boy bends down and holds out a sandwich. "Hey puppy, are you hungry?" The dog glances at the boy for a moment, but it doesn't move. A middle-aged woman, probably a former patient, stops too. She kneels and strokes its head. "Good boy. Who are you looking for?" she asked, her voice gentle. The dog blinked, but made no other response. It didn't approach anyone. It didn't bark. It didn't wag its tail. It didn't respond to human attention. It didn't look for food. It didn't look for water. It didn't look for attention. It looked for only one thing. One person. Liam felt a pang of bitterness creep into his chest. "Did he drink water?" he asked. Sophia nodded. "Yes. Some doctors and nurses brought him water and food, but he ate very little, just enough to survive." Just enough to survive, as if he knew that if he left, even for a little while, He might miss the moment the person he was waiting for would return. Liam shook his head slightly, a feeling of confusion spreading through his mind. Does anyone know where he came from? Sophia paused for a moment, then said, Nobody knows. It just showed up one morning, 3 weeks ago, and it hasn't left since. Liam glanced at the hospital door behind him. 3 weeks ago. Who was in the hospital that day? And more importantly, who never came out? If you've followed this far, we believe that there's a seed of compassion in you. Not everyone stops to see a tiny creature waiting in despair. Not everyone wonders why a dog can be so loyal, waiting in the scorching heat, refusing every invitation, just to stay where it is. Maybe you've witnessed a similar story. Someone, some animal, or even yourself has waited for something, whether it's a promise, a return, or a miracle. But the more important question is, what if the thing you're waiting for never comes back? Does this dog know that? And if he does, will he give up? This is where the story begins. If you want to know the truth behind this waiting, keep watching. And if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like. Not because of this video, but because loyal hearts like this dog still exist in the world. The Arizona sky slowly turned purple as the sun set behind the skyscrapers. Under the brilliant sunset, the air seemed to quiet down, except for the hot wind that still whispered on the street. In front of St. Mary's Hospital, the dog lay there, motionless, like a living statue, only its eyes moving, forever watching the hospital door. No one paid attention to it. No one wondered how a dog could be so loyal. But Dr. Liam Bennett was not like that. All day, the image of the puppy kept lingering in his mind. There was something very special about this dog, something he could not ignore. The question echoed in his mind like a refrain. Who is it waiting for? This puppy was unlike any other dog Liam had ever seen. Normal dogs would wag their tails and come running when someone called their name. But not this one. He kept his eyes on the hospital door, letting nothing distract him. Not the honking of cars, not the footsteps of hundreds of strangers who passed by him every day. He was waiting. But did he know that the person he was waiting for might never come back? The question weighed heavily on Liam's heart. He needed to know the truth. And there was only one way to find him. That evening, after his shift, Liam returned to his office. The computer screen glowed a pale blue, highlighting his thoughtful face. He opened the patient data storage system and began scrolling through the admissions for the past 3 weeks. Around the same time, the puppy had appeared at the hospital door. Dozens of names flashed by, but then one stopped him. Henry Walker, 72 years old, hospitalized 3 weeks ago after a stroke. No family, no visitors, dead in room 312. Liam's heart sank. The pieces began to fit together. The puppy hadn't been abandoned. It hadn't been lost. It had come here for Henry. But it didn't know Henry was gone. Liam wondered, how could a puppy find this hospital? A dog couldn't read addresses. It didn't have a GPS. But maybe its heart was the only compass it needed. There were stories of dogs walking hundreds of miles to find their way home, relying on instinct alone. Maybe the puppy had picked up Henry's scent on the ambulance. Maybe it had followed the trail of its only friend in life, walking through dozens of streets, passing hundreds of strangers, to find the door of this hospital. But it didn't know that this door would never open for it again. Something in Liam's heart suddenly broke. He had witnessed too much human pain in this hospital, but this was the first time he had seen the pain of an animal, a pain that could not be expressed in words, a silent pain that lingered longer than anything else. Did this dog know? Did it know that Henry had left forever? Or was it keeping a promise? A promise that it would never leave. That wherever Henry was, it would wait for him. Have you ever waited for someone? Someone who promised they would come back, but never did. Have you ever held out hope only to find that the world had changed without you even noticing? If so, you know this puppy better than anyone. And like you, it has a question. When should I give up? But the most heartbreaking thing is, it doesn't know how to give up. Liam looks out the window. The puppy is still there, still lying on the hot tiles, still waiting. He can't let it go on like this. This puppy deserves a new life. It lost Henry, but maybe it doesn't need to lose everything. Maybe it's time for someone to tell the truth. Maybe it's time for someone to help it find hope again. Liam stood up and grabbed his car keys. Some things can't wait until morning. He walked outside. He walked towards it. He walked towards a decision that could change both of their lives. If you followed this story to this point, we believe you have a big heart. Not everyone stops to listen to a story like this. Not everyone sees the value of loyalty, unconditional love, and the power of waiting. It's not just a dog. It's a symbol of hope, love, and connection that transcends the boundaries between humans and animals. If you believe that love never dies and that loyalty is the most precious thing in the world, then join me on this journey. And if this story touches your heart, please take a moment to support us. Not because of this video, because unconditional love still exists in the world. The story is not over. But the question is, can this puppy find a new home? Stay tuned. The Arizona sky was a heavy orange as the sun slowly sank below the horizon. The heat of the long day had eased, but the heat still lingered on the road. Dr. Liam Bennett did not rush out of the hospital like he usually did. Something held him back. Maybe it was the look in the eyes of the dog who had spent 3 weeks waiting outside the hospital. Maybe it was the unsolved story of who it was waiting for. Or maybe he was waiting for something, an answer, a deeper meaning that he could not name. He knew there was only one way to find out the truth. The next morning, Liam left the hospital earlier than usual. His car rolled slowly through the quiet streets of Arizona, leaving the crowded downtown behind and turning into an old residential area. The Henry Walker house was at the end of the street, a quiet dot in the middle of the noisy city. Liam stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. There was no sound except the wind blowing through the trees, carrying the scent of a place forgotten by time. The front door was ajar, as if its owner had left in a hurry and never returned. He walked slowly closer. Just outside the door, a dog bowl sat on the porch, empty, but still there. A reminder that someone had returned to this place every day, hoping to find something that no longer existed. Liam gently pushed the door open. Inside, dim light filtered through the windows, coating everything in a layer of dust. The house was small and simple, but it held so many stories. An old armchair sat in the middle of the living room. The blanket on it still held the warmth of days when someone had sat there for hours, reading, or perhaps simply watching him sleep at his feet. On the wooden table, a book lay open, its pages yellowed with age. These little things made Liam feel like he was entering a forgotten world, a world that Henry had left, but the puppy still tried to hold on to. Then Liam's eyes stopped. An envelope lay on the table, the shaky handwriting of an old man visible on the paper. Liam picked it up. The words on the envelope were simple, but carried more weight than anything he had ever read. To Charlie, the beautiful golden retriever, my only friend. His heart pounded. He slowly opened the letter, his hands shaking slightly. Charlie, if you read this, well, of course you can't, but I believe you'll understand. I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye. I knew you'd wait. I knew you'd find me. But this time, Charlie, I won't be able to come back. I don't know how to explain it to you, but I just hope you don't wait for me too long. If one day I don't come back, find someone who will love you, like I did. You deserve a better life. The letter fell from Liam's hands. His heart felt like it was being squeezed. Henry knew that one day he wouldn't be able to come back. He knew that Charlie would wait for him, no matter how long it took. But how do you explain to a dog that waiting is meaningless? How do you tell him that the person he loves the most will never come back? Liam walked back to the hospital, the letter still in his pocket. Charlie was still there, still in the same place, still waiting. Liam slowly sat down next to him. "Charlie," he whispered. The dog looked up at him, his dark brown eyes glistening in the streetlights. There was so much more in those eyes than he could say. Liam clutched the letter in his hand. Henry was gone. But Charlie didn't know that. He still hoped, hoping that if he waited long enough, Henry would appear, smile, and call him home. But if he kept waiting, who would call him home? There are moments in life when we have to make a choice between telling the truth or letting someone else keep their hopes up, between keeping a promise or learning to let go. Liam looked at Charlie again, and he knew he couldn't keep it waiting any longer. He gently placed his hand on Charlie's back, feeling the warmth of it, the warmth of a creature that had spent its entire life loving a single human. "Henry won't come back, Charlie." His voice was soft, but firm. The dog didn't respond immediately. But then, it whined softly, its ears flattening. Liam suddenly realized it understood. It had always been understood, but he didn't know what to do next. Liam took a deep breath. "If you want, I can be your new family." Charlie looked up at him again. There was sadness in those eyes, loss, but also a small glimmer of hope. And then, after 3 long weeks, Charlie stood up. For the first time, he didn't look at the hospital door. He looked at Liam. He had found his answer. That night, for the first time in weeks, Charlie didn't sleep in front of the hospital door. He had found a new home. If you have followed the story to this point, I believe you have a very big heart. Not everyone has the patience to listen to a story about loyalty. Not everyone understands that love exists not only between humans, but also between the smallest creatures. Charlie is not just a dog. It is a lesson about love, loss, and continuity. And if you believe this story deserves to be spread, please share it with more people. Not for us, but because love still exists in this world. The Arizona sky had darkened, but the heat of the day still lingered on the asphalt. In the darkness, the pale yellow light from St. Mary's Hospital stretched out the shadows of 2 creatures sitting side by side. A man and a dog who had spent 3 weeks waiting for something that would never happen. Liam sighed softly, his eyes fixed on Charlie. The dog remained motionless, not wagging its tail, not whimpering. But something had changed. It was no longer looking at the hospital door. It was looking at him. Liam knew Charlie understood. Not right away, not completely, but somewhere in its soul, a piece of memory had begun to crack. Henry would not come back, and more importantly, Liam would not leave it here alone again. He reached out, gently touching Charlie's soft fur. This time, it did not flinch. "I can't replace Henry," Liam said softly. "But if you want me to, I can be your new family." Charlie didn't move. Liam didn't force it. He just sat there waiting the way Charlie had waited for Henry, waiting for the way people waited patiently for broken hearts. And then, after a moment that felt like an eternity, Charlie stood up. Slowly, hesitantly, as if he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. But as he walked toward Liam, as he laid his head on his lap, Liam knew he had made a choice. He had chosen to move on. He had chosen to trust someone again. And sometimes, that's all we need, someone to trust. Liam gently lifted Charlie into the car. He didn't protest, just curled up, eyes heavy after long days of fatigue. For the past 3 weeks, it had been exhausted, not just from the heat, from hunger, from thirst, but because it had bet its soul on a promise that would never be fulfilled. But tonight, its journey no longer stopped on the hot ground of the hospital. It had a place to return to. The car sped through the night, the street lights passing through the windows like gentle streaks of light. Charlie was no longer awake to keep watch. For the first time in many days, it closed its eyes, no longer afraid of being abandoned, no longer feeling like it had to guard a door that would never open again. Sometimes, to move forward, the first thing we need to do is close our eyes and believe that there is a tomorrow waiting for us. In the first few days in the new home, Charlie was still not like a normal dog. He didn't run around. He didn't wag his tail. He wasn't eager to explore. Instead, he just lay by the window, quietly looking out, as if he was still waiting for something. Liam didn't force it. He understood. When a heart is broken, it can't heal overnight. Old habits can't be erased immediately. Old scars need time to heal. Charlie needed time, and he was willing to give it time. The next day, Liam brought a bowl of water and a portion of food. Charlie didn't rush to eat. He looked at Liam first, as if to make sure he wouldn't be abandoned again. Then, he started eating, piece by piece. It was a small step, but sometimes the greatest things start with the smallest steps. Slowly, Charlie began to change. He no longer lay motionless by the window all day. He began to follow Liam around the house, as if he had found someone to cling to. He began to sleep better, no longer waking up in the middle of the night as if waiting for an unfinished dream. And then, one day, as Liam walked into the house after a long shift, he heard a sound he didn't think he would hear so soon. A tail wagged. He turned around. Charlie was standing in the doorway. His eyes were brighter, more soulful. And Liam knew. He had begun to accept this new home. He had begun to move on. If you're still here, read this story to the end. You are someone who wants this world to be filled with love. Not everyone takes the time to listen to a story like this. Not everyone understands that love exists not only between people, but also between the smallest creatures. Charlie has found a new home. But how many other Charlies are there in this world who are still waiting for someone to come back? Maybe it's an abandoned dog or a stray cat. Or maybe it's a human, quietly waiting for someone to love him. If you believe that love can heal, that loyalty is the most beautiful thing in this world. Let this story spread further. Come here. We want to extend our sincerest thanks to you, the person who took the time to listen to this story until the very end. Out of millions of content out there, you chose to stay here, feel every detail, and accompany Charlie on his journey through loss, hope, and finding a new home. That proves that you are not just a viewer, but a person with a warm and compassionate heart. This story is not just about Charlie or Liam, but also about all of us, people who sometimes go through loss, wait for someone, also hope for a miracle. But above all, it reminds us that love is never lost. It just transforms into another form, another journey, another door that needs to be opened. So, what is the biggest lesson from this story? That is, never leave anyone, human or small, waiting in vain. If you have someone who loves you, don't let them doubt you. If there is someone who still hopes for you, don't leave them alone. Maybe, somewhere in this world, there are still other Charlies, loyal souls waiting for an open door, someone to welcome them, a roof to return to. If this story has touched your heart, let it continue to spread. Please like this video, not for us, but because love still exists in this world. Please share this story, because who knows, someone out there might need a reminder that love is never lost. It just finds a new form to exist. And before we leave, we have a question for you. How many points do you rate this story from 0 to 10? Leave your number in the comments. Finally, if you want to continue your journey of discovering emotional stories, meaningful lessons, and soul-touching moments, stay tuned for something special in the next video right above the end screen. A story that is even more touching and deeper, and might just change the way you see the world. We'll see you there, because warm hearts always find each other.